Well, my beginnings in music, start quite long time ago right now. It's like, after that most important spiritual journey to India 23 years ago right now, year 2000. I came back to Czech Republic, to Prague, and the music find me. I was not searching the music. Music find me itself. And just through some playing, start in the garage. In those times, things were coming just naturally. And out of sudden I was standing on big stage, playing with some people from Africa, from Caribbean. Most I need to mention, just these two artists, King Calabash and Baron Black, out of Martinique Island via Paris, France. And with these guys, things just was flowing naturally, and without studying anything, it just found me, and then it was just keeping the vibes, and go with it. Yeah. So was very intense life, full-time music, full-time touring, always on the road, then various projects, I say some African stuff, lot of things. Mostly that kind of black music, as we say. So from reggae, also to R&B, hip hop, all the way to some African music. And well, yeah, but was mostly that touring. So we were touring mostly the Central Europe. So besides of Czech Republic and Slovakia, a lot in Poland, Austria, Germany, Switzerland. Yeah. We were operating mostly at that region as it is. So as this bucking bang thing, and yeah, so was mostly that time. And then after my relocation to Canary Islands, it started to be more about Africa, and more Latin American influence came, and so we were just mostly focused on this region and that music. Yeah. So there were some tours and travels for music more there. So it was mostly Cabo Verde and Senegal. Well, mostly Senegal when it comes to even to playing and working with some artists. So it was mostly Senegal. It's all about Africa, I would say still, because Africa is the foundation. Yeah? We are all Africans, right? So it's all about this, and always was like main thing since knowing this and since everything, flowing naturally and coming naturally into my life. So then this African inspiration was always present, and really, without when I was first time playing in Africa, the question was how long you are living in Africa. I say I'm here first week. It was first my time when I came to mainland Africa, when we came to Senegal. I was in Morocco a long time ago, but real Africa, where those things coming from. And so even when it comes to my playing, it was just there. Same with reggae music. Those things I was not studying, it just really came to me, giving thanks. And so it was the same thing. And yeah, so you mentioned Angola. Angola, it's particularly interesting for that reason, for its cultural spread, through this, as we say, transatlantic slave trade road, because that's how African music spread into the world. And since this slave trade was mostly happening on the West Coast, so we are talking exactly Senegal, way from Senegal all the way to Angola, all the way to the West Coast. That's where the slave trade was mostly going. And yeah, so in traditional rhythm coming out of Angola was called Samba. And then via this road through the Cabo Verde Islands, where was another place where they was like changing some ships, or I don't know exactly. I don't study exactly how that slave trade was working on, because why even bother to study deeply some so negative, things. Well, negative things which have the biggest influence on the evolution of music same time, because what happened when this Angolan rhythm called Samba via that transatlantic road reached to South America. It developed as a samba, as one of the most influential music with the global impact until now. Everybody like Latin American music, Same thing, of course, then happened to Caribbean, and with salsa and all this, Caribbean rhythms, reggae music as well, of course. All this we are talking about African roots and foundation. So it's just this, and so it's these influences and following certain path, and following certain connection. How then this music, through absorbing influences from Europe, same thing, So in that music, you can hear some melodies of that time European music. So you can hear some, influence of these songs what were these sailors singing, or pirates music, let's say, or European music, Irish music, let's say, some traditional French music, accordion, these kind of things. And this then, mixed with those African rhythms, developed into those styles, And then coming back to Africa, because then there was big movement of Latin music in particular in Senegal again, because myself, and well, a lot of people studying music consider Senegal, Mali, and then let's say Angola and Congo as the most influential countries when it comes to development of music. Of course, you can mention Nigeria and all Afrobeats movement, from Fela, and until now, of course, That's interesting how even until now all this modern dance music, modern pop music, absorbing so much of it, all that Afrobeats movement. Wow. Now you listen any kind of global pop music and you hear these African rhythms in it, Reggaeton music, same thing, it's mixture of, still we are talking about this very old, African rooted rhythms. So that's that, yeah. And it's again that mixture, and that how even in those times in Africa where this African music absorbing these influences of that European melodies, especially this Portuguese stuff. So Portugal music was always, about this, sort of melancholy melodies, this triste, as they say in Portuguese. And so always this kind of, slow minor key tunes, and that's what then differs this music from let's say Congo music, because this is totally major key, and very like happy up tempo, music. In Angola particularly, the music it's also kind of up tempo, but a lot of minor keys, and a lot of this kind of melancholy, let's say, which have this Portuguese origin, in fact. So that's what I see as an interesting thing. And so then you can compare again that salsa, which develops in Caribbean, of course, Cuba and these places, and came back then to Senegal. So you have particularly Senegal salsa, which also is very different. It's much more guitar driven, because that's also goes that it was always more difficult to find good horns, in Africa than to find some cheap guitar, They could even make their own cheap guitar, but, to make some good quality sounding horns was always most difficult. Piano, very fine, good sounding piano in Africa, So, and so, yeah, these things. Well, all these influences which myself was absorbing during this time, Africa, but same time it was always Indian music, Indian classical music, and that principle of these drones, as something what is so like ancient, and so fundamental and so immediately spiritually appealing, I would say. This drone element, this ancient instrument called tampura, and all those ancient instruments, veena, sitar, and that spirituality in it, that's those things. So if you To put it this way, I felt always myself standing in between, African and Indian culture, spiritually, mentally, physically, you know, and like that. So, but still, Africa it's the foundation. Yeah? So even in Indian music, when it comes to rhythm part of it, you can hear some parallels, And in future, I'm even planning to more point on these connections, yeah. And there are ideas of projects, combine those ancient instruments, like Indian sitar and African kora, which are all same history, basically same history period, of origin of these instruments and same kind of mysticism, within, and yeah, so things like this. Well, definitely, definitely. I also very sure that any place you are living, makes some influence on you, even if you don't want it, or even if you don't feel like, then subconsciously, definitely, things are coming to you more than you if you even aware of. And so for sure, so actually when I come to start, with the production here, well, the plan was really because it was loads of this, let's say Latin and African music influenced tracks what I had and projects what I had from before to finish. But still, my second album what I ever released, was that project called Mantram Dub, and that was really combining, Indian mantras and Indian classical music with dubsteppers rhythms, So it's this, that we are culture of Sri Lanka. It's very specific, and you can't just say it's same as in India, right? Because we have done much more influence here and much more things going on here. So but still, India it's very near and it's have big impact, like very big impact of on local music and local culture as well. So I just feel it as a very natural thing, or those things were coming to me again, without asking, it was just very natural, flowing, to come back again and to create this kind of stuff. All the way that my second latest album was finally even using Sinhala music, thing called Sanskriti Adap, you can then find it anywhere. It's all around. So yeah, and this is first time, it's a bit modern fusion, but it's using Sinhala vocals, and more upcoming projects. It's planned with Sinhala, particularly Sinhala music, and yeah. Well, a little bit, I need to really get to it much more deeper, I wish, because I still know just really vaguely, I would say, about that history. But what is particularly interesting, it's goes just with the history of the island itself, right? So we have again, this influence of all these, European nations coming here, especially Portuguese and then Dutch, and we can hear some influence in this music, especially this thing called baila, which is like, this music got particularly very popular here. It's basically like popular music from between the people of Sri Lanka, and it got, from my knowledge about it, it got mostly developed like in 50s and then spread through 70s, 80s, and it's very important, present until now in various forms. And well, just the name itself, baila, says it all, no? So there are clear roots of this Portuguese, origin of it, or I would say Afro-Portuguese, origin of it. And this goes all the way to one very interesting thing what can be found when talking about the history of music here, and and even history in general, and this is the presence of these African communities originally from Mozambique, again because Mozambique was of course Portuguese colony, and presence of this until now present of very small communities, of these originally African people living here in Sri Lanka, and so these people called Kafiri people, and they are originators of that baila rhythm. Yeah, so that goes again back to, and then we are talking, about some, 14, 15, 16th centuries. Yeah, so that rhythm particularly have such a, deep history, and that thing called baila, the dance, right? So, yeah, but then it got, same way, because actually all these years, like 70s, when we're talking about late 60s and 70s, that was globally most influential time, when it comes to evolution of music everywhere, right? So exactly things what were happening, from Dakar to Lagos to Luanda and to Kinshasa in Africa was mostly had the biggest impact on evolution of African music, and well, even altogether music. And then of course Havana and Kingston, right, in Caribbean. So yeah, so those things have still biggest impact on evolution of nowadays music. And same thing, was here. So even in 70s was like biggest, evolution of that baila music mixed with Western instruments, with mixed with Indian instruments. So always there was presence of Indian music in Sri Lankan music. And in Indian instruments, definitely sitar, tabla, especially tabla knows everybody. Because then when you come to it and start to studying it more deeply, then you get back, to some rhythms which have some historical origin here, because here we also have this original inhabitants called Veda people, and they have their rhythms, these people was like living like natural tribe, it's just tribal people, right? So of course they had their musical forms and their rhythms, and this we go back to this what it's called kawade, and this is rhythm what is used until now during this religious processions, this perahera thing. And so part of it, it's always this kawadi dance. And yeah, so this is something what you really need to study, and something what is very present, until now, even in local music, any local celebration, it's connected with this, any local wedding, any kind of celebration, it's kawadi music, and even modern days DJs and local producers mixing these kawadi rhythms with this modern this hits, like top 20 hits, every year. So they make kawadi special remixes, and sometimes it's a bit harsh musically to my ears, let's say, but it's interesting, because it have this deep origin, and here it's like really you can see like a lot of these village people have some drums inside their homes, and they really that's like big culture of drumming, I would say, particularly, so we go back to the roots, again, and so yeah. Well, music in the temples, it's all about spirituality, of course. That's like something. It's like not even music, in that terms. Or we need to divide, what's the music, but you know, like this is something. Well, first of all, music is the language, right? Language which speaks most strongest way to the people, and so that's why we have all the spiritual traditions of singing in all the religious places, I would say, like from even in churches, right? It's always about that, and particularly in Sri Lanka, it's that thing what it's called pirit. Yeah, so it's basically mantras. Yeah, it's basically mantras chants by the monks, and it's all basically, or it's like stories from life of Buddha. Yeah, that's mostly what is it about. Yeah, and usually it's never like mixed with secular music, and which is what a lot of people doing with Indian mantras. But let's say by some Orthodox Hindus, it's also not widely accepted, this thing, because they dividing, that this is spiritual music, this is like secular music. And Myself, I believe in unity, even in this, So for me, it's no difference in it. The way depends on the way how you put it and on the context, yeah. But so that's it, It's the spirit thing, And it have, let's say, musically, it have also various forms, Sometimes it's just pure chants, done by these monks, or it sometimes use some instruments in it, Mostly just some ambient keyboards, Sometimes can sound a little bit cheesy, let's say, but sometimes, but if you focus on the meaning of it, you don't see it that way, and or some traditional instruments, So there are bamboo flutes, I don't know exactly how they call this flute here. Actually, I ask many people, and nobody can tell me exactly. And sitar as well, or that what they call here serapina, what is harmonium in India, this kind of instrument. So this is then very similarly sounding to what you can hear in Indian, temples music, even from Rajasthan and like that, tabla and this harmonium thing. Yeah. So that's mostly how it's musically and how it's traditional. But it's this, it's really music what serves to the prayers, yeah, to the meditation, to the mantras, So music what really just leads the purpose of it, to make the people, to some really higher state of consciousness, mind thing. So that's the purpose of it. Yeah. Well, definitely, because besides of this, let's say even European influence from these centuries, ago, there was between this, I mean, besides of these Europeans coming here, it was of course Arabic, Arabic traders, yeah, and even before these Europeans, of course, it was Arabic traders and Arabic sailors, and at those times. So I would say it's particularly this Arabic influence, much more than in India. Yeah, in some places in India you can hear it definitely too. It's this what it's general. It's some like Orient scales, or Oriental music things, So that's what in India music then developed in these orchestras like string orchestras. That's something what is very similar in some ways. Or when it comes like to really music theory, you can find some similarity in these scales and the ways how they're using it. Here it's even more in the singing. Yeah, you clearly hear some very strongly Arabic influence. Sometimes I even was asking my wife, if it's if it's not Arabic, it sounds even the pronunciation or the way how it was done. I always think this sounds very Arabic. This sounds very Arabic because I can hear clearly the Arabic scale. So this is like because we are also not far from Maldives Island, and they have also very specific music, and that's even more, because it was also more on the way of these Arabic traders, and of course it's Islam state. So there it's even more of that Arabic influence, I would say. But here it's very strong. So when I would like describe this music, I would say it's really a mixture of four elements basically, and it's this Afro-Portuguese thing, or I would say then I'm saying it Afro-Portuguese, but so then it's this Arabic and then it's Indian, yeah. So basically these elements what you can really clearly hear in this music, sometimes really very very Latin sounding things, when you like into Latin music you can hear a lot of influence from that, from really the harmonies, the way how they're using some intros, stuff like that. And then again, then lot of things from Africa, particularly from this Afro-Portuguese, colonies like Mozambique, and Mozambique, of course, it's quite near to Congo, so you can hear lot of, from especially in 70s, and early 80s was like lot of things, But if I can hear, I clearly hear that that's the Congo style playing of guitar, in that, and or some rhythms also. Just always it's like there is that Arabic thing in it, so more harmonies, and more some major, some minor keys, and definitely Arabic harmonies. And since closest was always the India, there there you go, and you have the tabla in it, you have the sitars in it, and all those bamboo flutes, and classical Indian influence instruments, basically. When it comes to the nature of the religions, I believe that it's all have one same foundation. It just depends on each and every culture and how it then developed in those cultural regions. Unfortunately, we know all this history of Europe and exactly Christianity and Judaism and all that, and it goes more with how all the history goes and have this sort of clash in between, have more some external reasons, I would say. But since the Buddha was born in India and everybody accepting this, and that before him was already Hinduism going on, it just goes like this. It's like basically there is not much difference. And then of course the Buddhism developed also very different way, and there are many differences between these two religions. But it's like I believe in this, that true people who are not following religion but who truly following those leaders, those originators of those systems what later develops as a religions, they don't care, because they just believe in unity and true spirituality, which not dividing, it's uniting, it's very opposite. So, this just, goes, as I say, with all the evolution of this particular cultural regions, how more people focusing on this essence, and how they forgetting that essence, which, exactly this, so it's more political things, I would say, than religious things. Of course, even here, we are talking this, what Rasta say, isms and schisms, right? So when developed from all those teachings of those historical persons, who was Buddha, either it's Jesus Christ, or it's Buddha, so then it's this what people do with the teachings of these particular persons, whoever they was, because most probably through their level of spirituality, they were sent here onto this earth, to spread this knowledge, and like this. So we don't need to get to this, because nobody knows, how who they truly were, and like this. But those isms develop then how the people accept their teachings, and and then we are in getting to what we call Babylon, right? When the people using and abusing those teachings to control and manipulate the people, and we are back to what developed with teaching of Jesus Christ, in terms of Catholic Church, which killed more people than Hitler in the history, and Mao Zedong and Stalin and all those, in the history, right? With all them Inquisition, and those things. This is what you teach. This is what you get from teaching of Jesus Christ, what we are talking about here, And unfortunately, of course, even here, as I say, it developed this way by those users and abusers, and they start to, use it as a form of politics to control the people, and I don't need to get to all these controversial topics, how even certain, monks are here in this country getting this way, political, and they acting, the way which is absolute opposite from what they are teaching, and like that. So, I would say it's those things, But those true followers, and those who are focusing of really, and who understand, those things, those teachings, who truly understand those words within these teachings, those, they just live in this unity and they don't divide, So, but let's say here, luckily, it's like this. I guess it goes also more with the general mentality of the people. They just, and through all those, cultural influences, coming, it's an island, so a lot of in various, influence in, all this history, of this coming, and that just makes people naturally tolerant to new things, and to different things, So here in relative, I must say it's relative peace, because there were some kind of clashes, even between, because we have also big Muslim community here, and but still, and then we are again in this particularly interesting place in this island, place called Kataragama, which is like most spiritual place in this island, which is equally sacred for Buddhists, for Hindu, for Muslims, and even for Christians, And those four elements lives there in perfect peace, because it's just like this, and you even feel it, if you go there, you just feel it, the vibe is there, it comes to you, you don't need to search for it, you naturally feel that peace, and that there is absolutely no space for any of these clashes, which are, absolutely irrelevant, and like this, by the true teachings, if you really following it truly.